Hi,
Hey,
Samita.
hey there, Kino. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. And yourself?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well.
Sam Evans Schreider, pronounced Schreider.
Yes, yes.
So talk a bit about your surname. What's the heritage behind that?
uh, I married a German. His last name in German they say Tschritter, and in the U.S. people say Schritter. But it's hard. It's really hard to pronounce. So I just tell people Schritter, and that's that's all it
Yeah.
is. Schritter.
So that's cool, marrying a German.
Yeah.
How did you guys meet? Did you meet in Germany or in the US?
We met in the US. His parents were just both of his parents immigrated to the US, so they are very strong in their German roots. And we met when I lived in Minnesota. We met over there, and now we live in South Carolina because his job moved us. So that's where we're at. He's actually my second husband, though, because I was widowed in 2019. My late husband died of cancer, and I had three little girls. So then I remarried in 2023. So
Yeah.
that's where the
Condolences.
thank you. Thank you. I mean, that's what the Prodigal Son Crackhead to Jesus Freak was about, is my late husband's story of being an addict and then accepting Christ and his transformation, and then he became a pastor and relapsed. So that's the whole story. it's a it's a mouthful. So
Okay. Yeah. You telling me about it now, me reading about it, there's so much to unpack here, on the show.
yes.
But we'll get there. We will get there. Let's get to know you, personally better first, as an author, multi-award winning author, mainstream author, fiction, non-fiction, poetry, 40 books. You've basically told us why you focus on grief and loss. So, Sam, what's your story?
Story. I didn't even realize I was an author until I had several books on Amazon. And some friends looked at me and they're like, You know, people don't write books for fun, right? Like that's not a thing." And I was like, I don't know. I write because I love it. And so I just started writing about my own life experiences. I think it started with blogging about like crazy camping experiences and outdoor hiking type things. I blogged about a polar plunge that I did up in Minnesota. This is probably pretty hard to imagine because it's really warm down by you guys, right? Down
We
there.
have our seasons. We have our
Okay.
season. It also depends where you stay in South Africa. Like I'm in Johannesburg, so winter is like really cold. I'm not a winter person, but it's really cold. Now we have
What does
got into
really
summer.
cold mean for you? What does what is really cold?
Well, I mean, okay, if there's no snow, okay, there's no
Doesn't
snow,
snow?
but yeah, yeah, it doesn't snow. There's only one area in South Africa where it does snow, and that's the Drakensberg. So rarely do we get snow unless there's like a hectic, cold front which works its way up from Cape Town, all the way up through the country to Johannesburg. But that happens once in a while, not all the time. But I don't know how to answer that question. What is cold for me? I'm just freezing and I got like two jackets on and I don't like it.
Well, so in Minnesota, when I was in college, we did this thing called the polar plunge in the middle of winter, in the middle of February, and my dog is playing with a ball right behind me, so that's amazing. Um, but we did this thing called the polar plunge, and they had to cut through 2 feet of ice in a lake to get to the water. And then you they would tie a rope around your waist and you jump through this hole in the ice and come out again. And it was the title of that blog was the dumbest thing I've ever done. That was that was the title because it was so dumb. So I will never do it again. I did it because the shyest girl in my hall that year did it, and I was like, if Janelle can do it, then I have to do it
Look at
too.
that.
It's like peer pressure. Um, but that's what I started writing, and I just put those blogs up on my website. And there was another one about how I went camping in Oregon, and I saw a wolf, like a wolf kind of wandered into my campsite. And instead of me getting into the minivan to be safe, I actually grabbed my camera and started walking after the wolf. Not the right, not the right choice. And then I co-authored that book with a guy who actually made wise choices in the wilderness. And so we kind of like paired against each other for that. Um, and then so because when I posted these stories on my blog, he was reading them, this other author, and he was like, "Hey, do you want to co-author this book with me?" I was like, "Sure, why not?" So we wrote a devotional based on like adventure stories and then a biblical tie-in. That was actually the second book I did because I had also self-published a book about miscarriage that was re-released in 2022. And that's called Love Letters to Miscarriage Moms. And that's a story of, well, it's a book of different stories, different parents who've experienced infant loss. And there's like 40 moms and dads that lend input to their different types of stories, like stillbirth and infertility and adoption and things like that. So, um, like I said, like the grief advocate unedited is kind of what I named myself because I have been in this grief space for a long time talking about really hard things. And I've found myself, it's like a secret talent, I guess, to be able to articulate hard things that other people can't put into words themselves. So that's kind of become my ministry. Um, I'm excited because actually this year I have a fiction novel coming out. They're all novels are fiction. I have a novel coming out. It's my debut novel, and I'm excited to not be talking about really hard things for a minute. So
But from what I gathered, you found a calling, to help people. I mean, all these topics that you have mentioned, people are really suffering with that globally. Even in 2025, like no matter what we can do to address it, people are still going through it and they don't know how to navigate those emotions and feelings. It's hard, it's hard out there. So big ups to you, honestly. The world needs you.
thank you. I appreciate that. Do you feel like you're doing something similar with your music and your podcast, helping
Yeah,
people?
so when it comes to these sort of topics, we have another podcast which is called Talking Back to Suicide. And I co-hosted with a child psychiatrist. She's based in Oregon. And that's every Tuesday. And based on what I have read about you, based on what you telling me, I would love to invite you onto the show. And hence why I say, we've been just over a year on the show. We've had amazing guests, from psychiatrists to, individuals who have attempted suicide, who have dealt with loss, grief, yes, has been on the show as well. And hence why I can say, based on what I have heard over the last year from these different individuals and the strength they actually have, it's like, it's such an ambitious goal, you know? And each Tuesday that we done with the show, her name is Diana, we do our post chat and we're like, wow, like where do we go from here? There's just not enough awareness on these topics, and here we are, doing our best. But why we started this is because we want to build collaboration with all the guests that come on to grow this together, to bring more awareness together. I tap into your community, you tap into my community. Let's see what we can do, you know?
Appreciate
Do you,
that. Yeah.
yeah. Do you ever feel that way, like when you write a book on a certain topic, like miscarriage, for example, and, the intentions behind writing it is all good, it's not about the branding, it's not about monetization, nothing of the sort. It's to actually make a difference, to guide someone. And then you sit there and then you still see those numbers rising on that specific topic. And you're like, am I good enough? Am I doing a good job? Then you have like all this anxiety around it.
I mean, I want people. My biggest message with the miscarriage book was you are not alone. Like I talk about some gross physical things that happen during infant loss and emotional things that are hard. And the whole message is like, yes, what you're going through is really hard, but you're not the only one that's experienced it. And I'm here. You're not alone. And I think the more people that hear about these resources, the better off we are. And the more people that write about them. I first wrote my book in like 2011, and there was barely anything on the market. And now there are a lot. I wouldn't say a lot of books about infant loss, but there are more. And I appreciate that because it's resources for people to help them so that they have somewhere to turn if they've experienced something really traumatic. And then, like with the prodigal son, a pastor who relapsed and we found a cancer diagnosis because of the relapse, like that's a whole it's a whole different story.
Yeah.
But what he wanted people to know was that they weren't alone and that God loved them. And there were other people, like Christians also struggle with sin, and Christians also make mistakes, and Christians are also real and dealing with demons. And God still loves us even when we mess up. So that's that story too. It's that idea that you're not alone, you're loved, and there are other people out there who have experienced similar things to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Before I comment on that, just to answer your question about whether I integrate, all this into music as well, I do, my best, because just like writing a book, you wanted to, give a strong message to the world because someone will read it and be like, right, now I got the answer to what I'm going through. So it's the same with music, you know, like think about when people are depressed or they're trying to find an answer to something, we look up, our favorite artists, whoever that may be, and you start jamming to their music, or playlists of what I'm going through now. And I mean, that's vital on Spotify, for example, or Apple Music, just type in and yeah, here's a whole playlist on anxiety, you know. I don't know, some people, they can get motivated and find their way out of that bubble. Some people can, dig the hole deeper. So it depends what you take away from it. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite song, like kind of your heart song for people that you wish they would just all listen to if they're struggling and having a hard time?
Wouldn't say I got a favorite song. Like there's just too many, but I can use my own personal experience. An artist who I listen to, jam to all the time, throughout my childhood, even now, is Eminem. It's just always been Eminem. you know, he just popped up one day. I was in I think like 7th grade, and was his second studio album that he released. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Eminem's music or not.
I have not listened to a lot of his music, but I really appreciate his story.
Yeah, yeah. So it was his second album. It was called the Marshall Mathers LP. I walked into the CD store at the time. Those days you still had CD stores, and when I checked the CD out, I'm like, okay, I just picked it up. Everything in life happens for a reason. So I just picked it up, and since that day, I was like, yeah, my mother didn't know exactly what she was buying me. so,
My first CD was Madonna Immaculate. It was,
okay.
it was my first. And some Ace of Base and CNC Music Factory. That's kind of yeah, that was what I was buying for my first collection. So
Yeah. And have you remained a Madonna fan?
not really. I mean, her songs come on and I sing along nostalgically, but I feel like I've moved on a little bit since then. So,
Yeah.
are you a Madonna fan?
Yeah. I'm actually, there's no artist I do not like, you
Hmm.
know. Madonna was popular, I mean, when I was growing up. I wouldn't say I went out and I bought her CDs, but I mean, if you jamming to MTV like I did, Madonna came on, you're like, okay, cool, you know? So I wouldn't say there's a genre I don't like. I wouldn't say there's an artist I don't like, you know? I'm just like hooked into it all, depending on what the mood is. Sometimes a song just pops up, and it's not an artist that you always listen to, but yeah, fits the mood. So you jam. But you use the key word there, nostalgic. I mean, that's the era we live in, right? I mean, all the music industry is doing right now, if you have the right like ear for it and you're actually paying attention and it's just good business, is that we're just remixing the past. That's all we're doing. New music gets released in this day and age. There's samples that's used from the 60s, 70s, 80s, even Eminem, Houdini. It's a sample I think that was in the 70s, if I'm not mistaken. So it's just remixed, because nostalgia sells. People want to feel that emotion. Okay, like for example, you may be going through something in life, in your adulthood, and you want to be motivated. You want to feel like the guy you was in high school, pumped up, you know. So you will look up Eminem, using me as an example. You look up Eminem, you'll play one of his earlier tracks that you listened to while you're in high school. Yeah, I feel like a man again, The feeling is back. So that's just how the industry is now. We want to take people back.
I mean, I do something very similar of my writing and nostalgia. I'm not always nostalgia, but I want the reader to feel and experience. And so I dive into the writing and use all five senses to bring the reader into the story and to feel it. So even with the Prodigal Son, which is nonfiction, I'm using all the things that I can think of to help the reader understand what my late husband was going through, what Clint was going through at the time. So, and myself, I'm one of the characters in the story. So,
Okay. Yeah. Okay, before we move on to, the book and your late husband, what's your opinion on why nostalgic still or exists the way it does? Why as humans do we want that?
I think there's a sense of homecoming with nostalgia. Like even, we're approaching Christmas time right now, and when old Christmas carols from like the 1950s, 1960s come on, I wasn't alive then. But even those old Christmas carols remind me of my childhood and the Christmas tree with my parents and my sisters when we were little. And just that feeling of being home or being together, being safe. I think that has a lot to do with the nostalgia feeling. Don't you think?
Mm, to be safe. Very true. Very true. I recall, yeah, a couple of weeks ago, it wasn't talking back to suicide. The topic also came up. And she was a music therapist. She's a music therapist also in the States. I mean, I never knew, you know, music therapists ever existed, Being in the music industry myself, I never know. But it was quite a cool conversation, to know exactly what they do. And it made so much sense to me how music can actually heal. And, she, shared the same concern as I did, like what I said a few minutes ago, is that sometimes the music can take you forward or can take you backwards. So if you're still feeling for that emotion from the past and it's taking you down the rabbit hole deeper, it means you're not really moving forward with your life. And that can happen. And that made sense to me. So you stay stuck and now you're getting depressed about the past instead of optimistic about the future.
Right. Right. I mean, it's yeah, that can happen for sure. Christmas, if you're alone and you're listening to those songs and you realize that you're alone and you've lost a family member to death or suicide or divorce, even like Christmas does not look the way that it's supposed to, quote unquote, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, you have experience in that, you know. So let's talk about the Prodigal Son, and Clint, whatever you're comfortable with,
Yeah.
yeah.
What do you want to know?
So
What are you curious about?
the story behind the story.
Story behind the story. All right, so this is basically the back cover copy, but I got a call from an officer at 1:30 in the morning, and Clint had gone out he was on a football team, and he had a football practice, and he was supposed to be home at like 8 o'clock at night or something, maybe even sooner than that, maybe even 6. But he wasn't coming home, and I kept calling and calling and calling, and finally at 1:30 in the morning I got a call from an officer. Miss Evans, this is the officer with the police department. There's been an accident. Your husband's alive. He was taken to the hospital. And he described the damage, and he said he will be arrested when he leaves the hospital. They're bringing him to the hospital to check for broken bones and bleeding. And when he leaves the hospital, he'll be arrested for the felony charge of fleeing police. Because when the police started chasing him, he tried to get away. And then 6 hours later, I got another phone call. Miss Evans, this is the hospital calling. We found something on the CAT scan. You need to come in right away. So my whole world, like the bottom of my life, fell out like immediate. Just I can't even describe how I felt, because it was like everything happened so fast I couldn't feel almost. And he was a pastor, and it happened on a Saturday night. So I had woken up after the call from the officer, and I was getting ready to go to church and make some sort of announcement to the people there, like, hey, Pastor Clint was involved in an accident last night, and I'll let you know as soon as I can. And so after I got that call from the hospital, then I called the church leadership, and I said, Clint was in an accident. I've got to go to the hospital. And they took care of the services, the church services. And then I went to the hospital, and he had relapsed earlier in our marriage. We'd been married for about 13 years at that point, but he relapsed the first 2 years of our marriage. And it was bad. We got in some arguments. The police were called a couple times. There were a few fights that got physical. It was not good. It was a very dark, very, very dark time in my life. And so we had talked about that, and we always referred to it as, because we lived in Chicago at the time, we referred to it as Chicago. Like, I can't go back to Chicago. I don't want to repeat Chicago. I don't want to do Chicago again. And so when I walked into the hospital, we had ongoing conversations about his addiction throughout our marriage. And he looked at me and he said, whatever you decide about our marriage, I'm not going to fight you on it. Because he knew we had kids. I couldn't go back to that place where we were getting in physical fights and having the police called. Like, that's not an environment I wanted our kids to grow up in. But then that same day, the doctor told us about stage 4 cancer. They found cancer when they were scanning for broken bones and internal bleeding. And so it was this huge, like, mushroom cloud, basically, like this huge, crazy time in our lives. And there was so much work involved, because he was going to chemo treatments, and then he also had court-ordered appointments for group counseling, and he was reinstated by the church eventually. And so he continued preaching from January of 2018 until May of 2019, and then he passed away in June of 2019. So he preached until a month before he passed away. But there was just a lot of work that happened in the middle there, and a lot of redemption, a lot of cool stories about, like, pastors who were struggling with secret sins and didn't know who to talk to, called Clint because they knew he wasn't going to judge them then, because he'd been through some things. And there's just a lot of, like, church members came forward and said, you've always shown us grace. We're going to show you grace. It was really just a really cool time. And somewhere in the middle of all that, he said, Sam, I want you to write my story. what's the chance that I would be married to an author whose best work comes from wounds? Because at that point, I'd already written a book about miscarriage. He said, I want you to interview me and write my story. So I interviewed him. I have 6 hours of audio of his voice telling me his story, telling me about growing up, telling me about being in what he called the drunk tank when he was arrested for being drunk and then had to kind of wait it off before he could go back into the rest of the jail. Um, and so we just did this whole interview of his life. And after he passed away, I continued interviewing other people. I interviewed the intake officer at the jail and the pastor who went to go visit him in jail, interviewed a guy he got in a fight with in high school that ended up like he got expelled as a result of that fight, like all sorts of things. And so I just continued writing. And I mean, like I said, he passed away in 2019. It's 2025, almost 2026. I started writing about a year before he died, and it's just taken me a long, long time because there were days where I would write a paragraph at a time, or months where I just couldn't even go look at the story. And I would work on social media or write a different book, write a different story, anything, because I couldn't stay in that space. Um, and then last August of 2024, I didn't think I would ever finish. And then something just kind of unlocked inside me at the end of December. I got it done. I got it written. And then just the editing process has taken almost a year to get that all taken care of. It's such a long process. You edit the edits and you edit the edited version of the edits, and it's crazy. Um, but it turned into this amazing story, and it's his and hers, right? So it's his story of being the addict, and he explains what it feels like to be addicted. And then it's my story of being the judgmental wife. Like I was straight edge or square, whatever you want to call it, growing up. I didn't do drugs. I've never smoked a cigarette. I always followed the rules. So being married to an addict was a huge was a huge change, and I didn't expect it. So the book also shows my struggles, and then my transformation, and learning how not to judge him, and learning that what he was going through was much more difficult than I realized. And like saying no to drugs, saying no to alcohol when you're an addict, it's not that simple. And I'm really hoping and praying that the book is available right now. The ebook is available for pre-order, and the paperback should be available sometime later this week. Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. There are so many. There are always so many things that can go wrong, right? But I'm like just hoping and praying that this is a book for people who feel like misfits or spiritual misfits, or like they just don't know, they don't have hope and they don't know where to go for hope. They can watch this couple struggle with all these things regarding addiction and come out on the other side. And it's not a happy ending necessarily, but it's a hopeful one, if that makes sense. Because in the end, he passes away, but we all will pass away eventually. So it's all the transformation that happened up to the day of his death, and the cool things that happened at his service are included. His funeral service, which we called Celebration of Life, and that's what I was going to talk to you about, the Prodigal Son tattoo, because he had on his forearms, he had Prodigal Son tattooed to his forearms like that. And the pastor who did his service had also visited him in jail. So when he visited Clint in jail, he saw Clint, his hands were on the table and he was like this, and you could see Prodigal Son as he was sitting across from him, praying for him. And he said in that moment, he wanted to take a Sharpie and write apostrophe S at the end of prodigal, because we are all prodigal children of a prodigal God. And that's where the title of the book came from. So that was his ink. He also had a lion on one arm and a lamb on the other. And he had plans for more ink. I don't know. Like, I guess it's kind of addictive to get tattoos. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, as you mentioned, also, like, I got a lot of tattoos, and yeah, I want to get more. But for me, it was, in love with the art itself and just expressing myself. Like, I mean, since I was a kid, I was obsessed with tattoos. I'm like, I am going to get tattoos one day, you know? And then
You
one,
write on your a lot too, like with markers and stuff when you were a kid, where you
yeah,
always like,
yeah, 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 yeah. I see that's a norm, must be.
my middle daughter she comes home from school and she's got like all this,
Yeah,
like, you know, the whole thing. And I'm like, oh man, she turns 18.
yeah. Like, I mean, back to me being an Eminem fan.
Yeah.
So, when I should watch Eminem, on MTV, and then I had like this whole file of Eminem, and my whole room was Eminem. So the marker was like, okay, let me imitate Eminem's tattoos. That's how it
Do you
started.
have his tattoos? Do you
No,
have
no,
some?
on the
Okay.
marker. I drew it like with the marker, because like, yeah, there were other people with tattoos, of course, but his one had meaning, they all had meaning. And then as I was growing up, I should see people getting tattoos and I should ask them, like, what's the meaning of this? And they don't know. They did it because it's cool. I'm like, what's the point of that? You did it because it's cool. You got a tiger on your arm and you don't know why you got a tiger. Like, a tiger. Like, why?
Right.
You know?
There's
So,
got to be
yeah,
a
it's
reason.
always, yeah, it's always wanted to have ones with meaning. So, with me, my right arm, this arm, okay, is sentimental arm. So it
Okay.
started off with my initial, mother's initial, father's initial. I was brought up a Catholic, so I got like the rosary going on, there. And then one of my best friends who passed away, I mean, he was only 24 at the time, he was murdered. So I got his name. And then just below that, I got Credo Domini, which means I believe. And then I've got some doves going on. Then I've got Mary. And then here is Jesus.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like it.
So, yeah, there's still room. And then on this, for my left
There's
arm,
still
this is
room.
my. there's still room.
Yeah. Tons of
Yeah.
room.
Then on the left arm, plenty room still left there. So
Oh,
our
no.
building here,
The blank
this is
spot,
like,
right?
yeah, this is my music arm. So how this started off is it's telling a story. So up here is this lady. So she's got headphones on and she's listening to music. And then we got the equalizer down here, which is like the bass and treble of what she's listening to. Then we got the notes. So the next part of this is to, okay, yeah, you fill up this part. And I
There's a
want like
blank spot
a
right
chord. Yeah. Yeah. So I want like a chord running from her through the musical notes and then down here, and it's plugged in to the notes. So she's listening to this note.
gonna hurt. Are you gonna get your hand, like the top of your hand tattooed or no?
Yeah, only this. Only my left arm. Yeah, the left
Sounds
arm.
painful.
Yeah. Apparently it's the most painful place, but yeah, only lasts for a couple hours. Yeah, so that's the plan there. But arms, yeah, my neck, and I think that's about it. You know, I got no intentions for like chest or legs.
I mean, it's a little bit different for women, I feel like, because I feel like your whole abdomen is just off limits, or should be, because if you get pregnant, then it like changes the shape of the tattoo. And I'm not opposed to getting a tattoo. I've just never thought of anything that I wanted there permanently. Like, I didn't want to just, get a dolphin or a heart or star. It had to have some sort of meaning, like you said. And I'm like, I don't know what I want there forever. That would, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So with Clint, it's
Mm.
either opposites do attract, or you attracted to bad boys.
I think it was a little bit of both. Um, Probably the bad boy thing. I I liked that he had a different perspective. I did appreciate that. He didn't lie to me. When we met, he was clean, sober, and he told me about his background. So I knew that he'd been an addict or and see that was how I thought of it. Like he was an addict in the past. So now it's over and it's done and I'm never going to have to deal with it again. That was like how my brain thought through that. So when he relapsed, I was like, I, I don't, I don't know what to do with this. Um, yeah, but we were like, I liked his perspective on people. He just saw people as people, and he was a lot less judgmental than I was, quite honestly, because he'd been through so many more things. But he understood like people were doing their best. And now I have this phrase that I didn't, he never said it, but he kind of taught me that people love to the best of their broken ability. And that's kind of just come from him. Like he taught me how to have grace for other people. And I still judge people for really stupid things. If they're driving on and looking at their cell phones, I'm like, you are endangering my life because you have to check that text while you're driving 55, or what however fast. Like don't that's not my favorite. Um, so I still chitted people a lot, but he taught me to be more gracious and to try to just see the other side of things, I guess. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. No, it does. I mean, it's human nature to judge, you know. We all have done it. We all still do it. And it's just part of the human journey, in my opinion. I also try my best. I mean, and, you know, like 80, 90% of the time we inherit that, from the previous generations. Because when I look at, my parents, grandparents, they grew up in that communities where it was always about judging, and I guess there was nothing better to do for them. you know they, they never have the opportunities we have today. They couldn't go wherever they wanted to go like we can today, or have the freedom that we have today. So I sort of get it. And when I was growing up, I inherited that, of course. Now, that's how it's supposed to be. I'm just going to grow up and I am going to judge the whole world because that's just how it is. Then, you start to realize, for me personally, with my journey, you wake up one day, and this was me in my 20s. I'm like, what am I doing here? you know then I started working on myself. I started working on my subconscious. I started paying attention to the bad behaviors that I have, and giving awareness to all of that. And then I started to write down, the whys, like, why do I do this? And then whatever answer comes to mind, I write that down. Then I start to like work on it. Okay, let me see if I can change this. And then I spent, about a good year doing that. The writing, working on my subconscious, spending time in nature, meditation. You know, I
Did
went to
some of that
Thailand.
make cool songs? Oh, yeah, tell me about Thailand. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. No, like Thailand was just like the spiritual calling. I went there, I spent a month there, and definitely was a spiritual calling. Yeah, being in music and a DJ was also a great party. But like when I watched how they did it there and the respect they have for one another there, and then I came back with that, I was like, wow, okay, that was impactful for me, you know. So then I just changed, I still make errors. I'm human, it's okay.
Right. Right.
So, but when I look back at who I was 20 years ago versus now, like, yeah, can see a change, Now, even though I'm Catholic, I push all that aside and I just wake up each day and I do my best to be a good human, How can I be a good human today? Go out in the world, smile at people, even if I don't know you. Hey, what's up? How you doing? You know, and I feel that, and this has come up a lot on all the podcasts. Like when you greet someone, when you feel this urge to greet someone, I don't know what that person is going through when I'm greeting them, but God does. And maybe no one greets them today. Nobody showed them love today. So yeah, I was supposed to greet you, ask you, how are you? Hey, I'm good, and you? No names, nothing of the sort, not where you from, where you stay, no long conversations. Just a simple smile. How are you? And then you see them smiling back, like, yeah, okay, cool. It's something good there.
I like that.
Yeah.
I
But
got,
okay, no, sorry. Yeah, continue.
well, I was gonna ask about if any of the when you were writing and processing, becoming like bettering. Let me try that again. I was gonna ask if when you were bettering yourself and writing all that stuff down, if any of that became lyrics.
No, not really. But
Okay.
you raised a good point. You raised a good point.
Maybe you should open up those journals. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, the thing is with that, where I can see roadblocks, and this is like a constant problem, is finding, like, I'm not a vocalist. Yeah. Okay, I can write down some stuff, you know, but that was up to the vocalist to come in, okay, yeah, there's stuff in it, and cool, okay, let's record it. It's keeping the artist consistent. That is such a struggle, in the music industry, is being consistent. Like, this takes time, and this is something I've realized also in the book industry. Like, it takes time. Hence why, like, I broke into the book industry, with Mickey, because, when the conversation came up, I was like, yeah, I would love to have authors on the show, because I see the same issues going on, with the journey. The end product is different, but going through the same issues: marketing, branding, sales. Yeah, let's talk about it. So it's like, musicians think, okay, we're going to get into the studio now. We're going to record a track. Kino is going to release the track. It's going to be on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, Deezer. Yeah, we made it. 1 month later, the royalties are flowing in. We're millionaires. Now we're ballers. No, it's not how it works, right? So with me, I looked outside the borders of South Africa and what people were telling me and how the mainstream, industry was actually working. I started to educate myself outside the borders. I found coaches in the US. I started to network, with these communities, and that's how I developed myself. But these guys, they don't want to do that. This is a process. You need to do these things, and it's not just about getting into the studio. Then I thought to myself one day, okay, I need to fix this. So we're not going to jump into the studio straight away. No, first we're going to work on you as a person, just like how I had to work on myself. So, like, first we're going to focus on psychology. That's what we are going to do. So what happens now when an artist comes to see me? I'm like, sit down. Now I'm a psychiatrist. Now you're going to refer to me as Dr. Kino. You know? They don't start working on them, because there's so many blockages happening there. And if we don't fix these blockages now, your career is just gonna go, and we see that happening. It's happened with mainstream artists as well. How many artists, Whitney Houston, Avicii, have died by suicide, because there's psychological barriers there, negative barriers that you're carrying with you, just like how I carried those with me. If I never fix myself, you and I wouldn't be having this conversation today. Who knows where I would be today? So that's what I try to start with first. Doesn't always work. Like, I got this questionnaire, and this is a laugh out loud. It's a questionnaire on self awareness. It's like 10 basic questions about yourself. And Sam, you'll be surprised, what answers you get back. When you're asking an artist to fill in this questionnaire, and the first question is, who am I? And you're giving me your name and surname, problem here. Right? We have a problem here.
That's not what I mean. That's not what I mean.
Describe yourself to me. Like, which color do you feel closely related to? Gives me some sort of direction, where you're at the moment. Let's talk about your past. Let's talk about your childhood. Nah, I don't want to talk about that. Yeah, I see problem. Why don't you want to talk about that? Back to the whys. I had to write down the whys. Why when I consume alcohol, I behave in this manner. There's people who consume alcohol and they can still have a good time, right? There's people who consume alcohol, the next thing you know, they're in a bar fight. You see, that's a
Right.
chemical imbalance. And those were things I noticed with myself as well, throughout school and college. When my friends and I should consume alcohol, next thing we know, we're in a fight and we're coming home with a blue eye. But at those days, you were like, yeah, I'm the man. Yeah, I showed him, But then as I got older in my 20s, I'm like, nah, something is not right here. Something is not right. And believe it or not, after I started working on myself and I consumed alcohol like a chest, I was chilled, I was calmed, I went to sleep. I'm like, yes, that's the change I want. You know?
When when you were talking before about like saying hi to people and just greeting them and smiling at them, it made me think of the phrase "tell them." I trademarked this phrase "tell them," and I've done nothing with it yet. But eventually, I want to have like a sweatshirt or a T-shirt that just says "tell them," and then when people ask, tell them what? That you are loved, that you are not alone. Like whatever that positive affirmation is that comes to your mind, like you get to tell people when they ask, tell them what? That you are not alone and just encourage them that way. I think that'd be cool.
Yeah,
So,
that's cool. That's cool.
yeah,
Yeah. So it's a project in the making.
it is. One of my poetry book that you referred to is the title is She Told Them They Were Loved. Because when all this is over, this whole life, that's what I want my epitaph to say. That's what I want people to say when I'm gone, is that she told them they were loved. That's
Yeah.
that's the goal.
Look, there was a question I wanted to ask on addiction, but since you mentioned she told them they were loved, you sent it to me. When I opened it, I'm like, okay, this is going to take me some time, but we can mention it. So let's touch on that.
Um, honestly,
That story behind the story.
no, it's okay. Honestly, that book was just a compilation of a lot of different poems that I'd written over time. And the first poem I wrote was in third grade. It was like way up high in the sky where planes don't fly. It was like my very first poem, but it won an award. So I just put it in the book kind of for nostalgia's sake, for fun. Um, and I wanted something to practice with because I knew I was going to be publishing other books, and the publishing process has a lot of learn as you go, and you make a lot of errors. And I'm sure it's the same thing with the music industry. So She Told Them They Were Loved was kind of a practice book, but it turned out so well. And it has all this poetry about grief and loss. And there's a section in there, just humorous poems. There's a poem about my husky, my Siberian husky eating the internet because he did that. He didn't eat, he ate the cable for our Wi-Fi internet connection when he was outside twice. And so I just wrote a poem about the husky, and I wrote limericks about COVID-19 and how like, congrats to the class of 2020. Pomp and circumstance looked a bit funny. You spent your prom dancing with mom. Congrats to the class of 2020. And something just like all this, because we're going to have to laugh about grief or you're just going to fall over. Sometimes you have to smile about things that don't seem funny to other people when you're grieving. Um,
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's what that book is. It's just a compilation of poems. Some of them are serious. Some of them I wrote as a widow right after my late husband passed. Some I wrote just for fun. And I put them all together in this gorgeous book. The interior designer was amazing. So that's what that
Yeah.
is.
But browsing through today, even though, I haven't gotten to reading it yet, like, you are really good at what you do. You
Thank
know,
you.
like, you can tell, like, I know they say don't judge a book by its cover, but when you really just browse, you can see, okay, this is well put together.
Right.
Yeah.
I owe a lot of, I mean, the writing is all mine, but I owe a lot of that to my graphic designer as well, because she's phenomenal. Um, so I'm not, she asked me not to say her name because she has too much work. She's like, I don't want, please don't send anyone else my way. Um, but I love her.
But that's the first, I got too much work. Don't say who I am.
Yeah, she works for a Christian publishing company and then she does freelance work. So between those two things, she's super busy. Um,
Yeah.
but that's that song that I wrote, the first country Christmas song. I wrote the lyrics for that. And it's about a guy who is obviously the black sheep of the family and he shows up to his parents' house for Christmas kind of unannounced. And then they're surprised to see him there. So when he sees their hesitation, he leaves and goes to the nearest bar and just starts singing this country Christmas song. And it's the first country Christmas song, but the first Christmas. So he's singing about the angels and the shepherds and the wise men coming to see Jesus and that whole piece. Um, do you have a chance to read that poem at all?
No,
Okay.
haven't. But I will.
Um,
I will.
But anyway, so I wrote that in 2022, and I have been looking for someone to hear the melody for that song ever since. Because I am a lyricist, but music is not my thing. The doctor actually told me that I have not flabby eardrums. What do you say? Like wiggly eardrums. Like when I try to harmonize, I can't. Like sometimes I hit it, but it's kind of an accident, or I'll like be a half step off and it's terrible. Like it's really bad. And so I tried. I It's really bad. Or I'll get like the last note of the song because if people are holding the last note for like 8 seconds, that it takes me 4 seconds to find it, and I find it, got it, we're there. Now the song's over. So, I tried to write the melody for the first country Christmas song, and I put it in the key of E, and I got like 2 measures in writing the notes on treble clef, and I was like, this is gonna take forever. Like I was like, I'm done. So that's the end of my songwriting career, beginning and the end, like just really fast.
But I don't know. I don't want this to be me taking advantage of the situation here.
I would
But
love if you read the song and you hear the melody, it's yours. I just want someone to sing it.
but it can be yours. There's actually 2 female. One's a ghostwriter who doesn't want to be named, and you and Diana have so much in common. So that's 2 artists that are in the US, and I've got them on a publishing deal because they have the same issues as you. So they're great at writing, same like with Diana, great at writing poetry. So there's tools that she uses to compose the music. AI is involved here, but it's great. She uses that. She sends it my way, and I just handle the rest for her, and then the music is out there. So if you are interested, let me know.
Yeah, I mean, I sent you the song lyrics, so if you want to read them and look over it and see if you hear the melody, that would be totally fine with me. I would be fine just having the lyric credit for the song. Um, I I should not. I took a music theory class in high school, and I had every intention of like learning how to write music, and it didn't.
Yeah.
It didn't
You
work.
know what I am going to do? This is what I love about how podcasts, is changing the world. So what we've done with Diana now is I've created a record label for her. So the name of her organization is called the Hold On Campaign, dedicated to suicide and mental illness. So we've created a record label for online. So the long-term vision of the label is to attract creators such as yourself now, who has a strong message for the world to change people's lives. And we route them now her way. You work with her. So if you don't want to get involved in the composition and all those things, you take your credit for the lyrics. Of course, I'll handle that. So she partners with you. She signs you on the hold on campaign and then works on the music. Then she'll send it my way, for the distribution, the publishing, the artwork, etc.
Can I ask, do you play an instrument, a musical
I only
instrument?
play a studio piano, not your classical, you know.
Play
Yeah.
classical piano?
No, not
No,
the traditional pianos. It's a studio piano. Yeah.
studio piano, like chords, basically. Is that what you're saying? Chords, like I don't know. Do you play chords?
So because I'm like, which like I wish in my life like I had the time to like spend time on a piano, specifically a piano, old school piano, like proper. Like I've also done music theory, courses and so on, but I just never found that dedicated time. So what I do is I basically just create samples, you know,
Yeah.
create samples. Now we live in the sample era. So you got all these different people who are just creating samples, and then I just put it all together and come up with the final product. Then I go out and look for a vocalist, put him on the track. Yeah, we're good to go. And that's the era we live in. And for me, where I am right now, it's just good business for me to sustain myself. So
On your niche, that's perfect.
yeah, so in the future to come, yeah, hopefully I find the time just to dedicate myself, and play Beethoven one day, who knows, you know? But yeah, let's see what happens, let's see what happens. So
I
I want to, oh no,
Go
no,
ahead.
sorry.
No.
No, you.
I was just gonna say I'd given the lyrics to a friend and she said, "Yeah, I'm working on it," and then I just never heard back. So
Yeah,
I mean, it's
we
happened a
can
couple.
definitely work on it. No doubt we can work on it, So I just need to connect you with Dana, you know. So first up is I'll see, okay, which slot does she have for you to come on to talk you back to set if you want to, she'll send
And this is the other podcast host from
yeah,
Oregon.
yeah,
Okay.
from Oregon, where you can talk about the grief and loss about your book, and your story and we share that with the world, just like we share this show with the world. And let's see what we can do to tackle, mental illness. And then possibly in that, we can, but I know it's towards the end of the year now. So early next year, we just connect and then we have the conversation about your music. It's a good space to be in with the work that you do. I'm not going to lie to you. So what I've done is I've just made it easier, less expensive for artists such as yourself to get their good work out to the world in musical form and let it get to the people that need to listen to, because as we were talking about how people go to Spotify or Apple, searching for that song or that artist that's going to put them in the right state of mind. Sam could be one of them. Yay. you know
Yeah, that would
Good luck
be
with you.
that would
So
be
you'll be
amazing.
all over the show. You'll be in the book industry, you'll be in the music industry. Your music will just, or your work itself will just be,
Sure.
or your message out there.
I have dreams. I have a dream of being in a church one day or being somewhere and hearing my lyrics on the radio, which I'm sure you've had that same dream and you made it come true. But like,
Yeah. So
yeah,
we can do it. We can do it. I can make that happen for you.
I like it.
Yeah. So let me check it out in December, right? I'm going to check it out, play around with it. And then early next year, January, we start having a conversation. And we take it from there.
And Dana is the music person. Is she the
So, so Diana, she's just been focused on mental illness. She's a great illustrator, involved in poetry, just like you, right? And we met on this show, over a year ago. She came out to the show, and we had this long conversation about mental illness. So why she came on this show was because I was focused on mental illness in the music industry with independent artists. So that's how we ended up connecting. So we connected, And then about a month later, she reached out to me. She's like, Kino, you know what? I want to start a podcast. And you're a great podcast host that clearly you know what you're doing in the scene. So I want to start a podcast just dedicated to mental illness. I was like, yeah, sure, cool, no problem. And then she was like, I want to bring you on as a co-host. I'm like, yeah, sure, no problem. Then we started off. And since then, it's just been wow. We've had guests in the US, to Europe, Australia, because I mean, this is a global pandemic that is not talked about enough, or at least not as much as COVID, but the numbers are worse than COVID when you really look at it. So that's how it started off. And then she also had the same thought as you one day. Hey, you know what? I want to turn the poetry into music. That's what I want to do next. I need to tap into the market. So then I helped her with that. And then here we are. So we're just working on the music right now. The label's already been set up. And then once it's done, she hands it over to me. We work on the art cover together. I handle the distribution. I handle the publishing. I handle all the legalities in between, the logistics. And maybe get our music out to the world. So yeah, we'll have the conversation.
That sounds great. Yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be amazing.
So I know we're at the hour mark, but I need to ask this question. It's been on my mind.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
And there's a reason I'm asking this question. There's a story behind it. So crazy enough, and this is crazy how God works, right? Over the weekend, the topic of addicts and addiction came up. So in South Africa, we have what's called halfway houses. It's these houses where addicts go to, right? Some your family can pay for. You go there. Some is pro bono.
There's a story about Clint at a halfway house in your book.
Also, halfway houses are international. You see, I never know that. So anyway, there's a halfway house about 2 blocks away from me. I never know it was there. And I think it's recent because, I mean, I've been staying here for a long time, right? I would have noticed, like I've noticed recently. So this house is like just for females. So I noticed over the last couple of months, there was this group of females, they were in the area. So we got like there's like a grocery shop downstairs. There's like a small shopping center opposite. So yeah, so I've never noticed them. That's why I say this must be like new. So I should notice them, walking up and down. They should come to the shops, and I'm friends with all the guys in the shops. And everyone should ask me, like, what these girls? I'm like, I don't know. Like, how am I supposed to know?
How do I
know? Just because I know everyone around doesn't mean I know who they are. So anyway, I should notice, okay, cool, But once again, I stay out of people's business. As I said, the whole, I'm not doing that anymore. Whatever's going on in your life is going on in your life. So they should always like greet me and stuff. It was just a hi, yeah, how are you? Cool, not who are you, what you do. I don't do that. So it was about a week ago. Yeah, a week ago, one of the girls, we were both standing outside. The rest of the girls were inside the shop. And then she like just opened up, started talking to me. First, she asked me, what do I do? And so on. I explained to her what I do. She asked me, I stay. I'm like, yeah, no, I just stay next door, Or who then I asked her, like, what do you do? And then she's like, she started to open up, like currently she's unemployed and she's in recovery at the moment. Yeah, so anyway, that was that. Then over the weekend, one of my school buddies, he stays quite far right now, but his son stays here. So him and I, we grew up the same, right? He had, we had the same amount of family support. He was much more financially well off, but he, while we were in college, ended up as an addict, like as a drug addict. Okay. So he went through like a dark period from spending 6 months in jail, coming out, relapse, clearly the whole family time. Let you stay with your uncle here, never really work out. Similar to Clint's story, like relapse.
Yeah, in a lot of ways.
Went to one of these went to one of these halfway houses, came out, relapsed again, went back, came out, got better after he met someone, but never really heal 200%. And that's what I'm evaluating now. Like, I'm really observant, with one's behavior. So, and then what trend he has or what skill he picked up, and it takes a real, what's the word to use? So, when there's someone who doesn't know, someone who notices bullshit, at first word. So that's who I am. Like, I can notice bullshit where good
Mhm.
99% of people will get manipulated by you. So that became his skill. He knew how to talk and manipulate people. Where I am is
Mhm.
like, talking shit to me. That's not going to work on me. So that's become like his skill. So for me, he hasn't like fully recovered. Yeah, he's gotten his life together. He's got his kid. He's got a stable job. Or he says so. I'm just taking his word for it right now.
But you feel like he's lying about some things
I
too,
feel
or
like
hiding things.
I feel like he has a stable job, but I just feel there's certain things he's saying about the job that just don't make sense to me. But I'm not going to tell him that, right? So I can pick up on that. So anyway, over the weekend he was driving past. He stopped just to greet me. We got into a conversation. Then we saw these girls again. So he asked me about these girls. I said no, they also in a halfway house and so on. They came out the shop. He got into like a small brief conversation with them because like all the halfway houses are like linked, like run by the same coordinators and sponsors and so on. So they had a brief conversation. So I'm sitting there, I'm observing this conversation. But what I realize is what he's telling them is half truth when I'm looking from the outside. And I'm thinking to myself, if you haven't gotten your life 100% together yet and you're still using your vocal skills here, but not like how Kino is using his vocal skills to actually empower and change, you using it to manipulate and give some sort of hope where there isn't hope, because I just feel like the system is not right at the moment. And when you look at the stats, 1 out of every 10 that leaves actually fully recovers, which is a problem for me. That's a huge problem for me. So other halfway houses in South Africa now, because it's the only place where I got like stats and I can observe, that's a problem. So it's not working. It's clearly not working, and something needs to be done. And I don't really agree if you're putting 20 people in the same house together and expecting all of them to heal, because as I said, being observant again now, being observant of this crowd now, I can see things are not exactly how you're portraying it to be. There's a lot of discrepancies in here. So that's how I just left it. And I'm like, okay, what's next? Because clearly God has put me in this situation now to do something about it, but I don't know what to do about it. And hey, I've met Sav. So, so
Me, my
brief.
first thought was like, "Hey, I know this great book. That's not the right answer. That's not the right
Yeah,
one."
I mean, briefly. I mean, we will continue this conversation, no doubt about it. But
Right.
what's your take on it? What I've just told you? Am I right? Am I wrong? Am I seeing right? Am I seeing wrong?
If you have like I I call it like the BS meter, right? Like if you have that bullshit meter and you can tell when someone is not being truthful. Clint had that. My middle daughter has it. The one with the the one that tattoos herself at school. She has that. She can tell when people are being fake. And I mean, trust your gut. So don't get pulled into anything and just keep watching. I would just keep watching and to see what would happen and pray for God to speak to you. And like, should I say something? Should I step in? God, how can I help? Because clearly, I mean, he basically brought them to you and put them on your block.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
Literally.
Yeah, right? So that's kind of crazy actually that happened. I would just keep praying about it and like in situations like that I remain silent until I know what the right thing is to say, because in grief especially I've learned, and I mean this goes for a lot of different life situations, but learn that it's better to
Hey,
say,
you frozen. Can you hear me?
"Oh, no, I can hear you, but can you Can you see me at all or no? Am I still frozen?
Hey,
Ah,
yeah, can hear you.
so I've learned that it's better to pause for just 2 or 3 seconds and think about, what the right thing is to say, or maybe realize that there's nothing to say at all and just kind of observe and be present. Um, you're right in that putting a lot of people together can sometimes be problematic because it can all build each other up. And at the same time, if someone got their hands on drugs or alcohol, that one person could bring the entire group down. But that's just the risk of the situation. I remember Clint talking about the halfway house he was part of was on Lake Street in Minneapolis, which was like known for drug deals. They put the halfway house on a street that was known for drug deals. And I don't know, like maybe it was just an inexpensive house. But he looked out the window at one point and saw a man addicted to drugs walking around trying to score a hit off someone. And all he would have had to do to relapse was like leave the house and go down the block 1 or 2 blocks in any direction. And so I think it's dangerous. Addicts have a really hard time getting sober, and like half of them wants to get sober and half of them wants to continue using their substance. So it's a battle. It's just, I would say, just be supportive and loving and kind and share your unedited truth, your unmasked truth. Like they're masking their truth. And I would just say to like be real with them and share your encouragement and your positivity that you have been doing, and just be present for them when you can be.
Yeah, that is great advice. Thank you. Thank you for that. Because it's just been playing on my mind, You see, and God brought Sam now to the picture. But I mean, I need to read your book because your book can make an impact for guys like me or girls like me in a similar situation. What do we do next? Okay. Based on Sam's story, how do I go about this? What can I take away from this? What can I learn from this? How can I handle this? You know, Someone could be going through the same thing now with a partner, with a brother, with a sister, with a mother, with a father. Be like, okay. And this is where I feel like your book, your work fits in. So
And
thank you
then
for
again,
writing it.
thank you. You're welcome. And that's the thing is just I don't want people to feel like they're alone. I show my struggles. I show myself yelling at Clint's grandma. I show myself shoving him in a physical fight we got. And so like it wasn't easy for me. I had judgmental thoughts, and I show my judgmental thoughts in the book because it's not easy to support someone who's going through addiction either. Um, and it's real. It's real people who are Christian. I feel like a lot of times, and you can disagree with me if you want, but I feel like a lot of times people try to hide, like you were saying with your friend, try to hide the dirtier truth. But I feel like Christians do that too. And they're almost afraid to admit they sin and afraid to talk about that. And so it was really important for me to show two Christians, two people who love God, struggling with sin and struggling with real life issues that are really dark and hurtful and painful.
Yeah.
So,
No, 100%. 100%. I agree with you. Any religion, actually. Any religion, you know, the issue is there. The issue is really there. Early on, I wanted, when I said, before I comment, let me tell you about the music. There's a book that I read. It's called Unqualified, How God Uses Broken People. I forgot who the author is. But I think there's also uh, sorry?
I do that with music. I do that with songs. I'll sing the entire song and they're like,
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah. So in the book, exactly how you have explained it is what the author is saying. Like what you said earlier on the show, like God loves you the way you are. So whatever you're going through now, He doesn't expect you to be perfect. You know, He doesn't. He accepts you the way you are. All this negativity that you feel about yourself, the low self esteem, And he talks about our third words. Like, what is your third words? I am what? I am what? So if you're saying, I am, unworthy, I am whatever, he accepts you for that. There doesn't need to be like a third word. It really doesn't. So just be yourself with God, and He is going to direct you. He is going to help you. He is going to tell you what to do next, like what you mentioned earlier on. It's okay to be unqualified in God's eyes. You don't need to be perfect.
Right. There's a difference between perfection and persistence, perfection and trying, right?
Yeah. Not even the Pope is perfect. Come on.
Aiming. Yeah. And that's the whole point. Yeah. Like, let's not pretend. Let's not pretend things are all sunshine and rainbows all the time.
Yeah, 100%. So, Sam, we can continue this conversation for hours. That's the honest truth. But as I said, it won't stop here. It won't stop here. So let's see where this takes us next. So, where can people find you online?
My website is super easy. It is loveunedited.com. So if they go to loveunedited.com, they'll find information about my books that are coming out. And if you scroll to the bottom, there's a link icon, and you can find all my social media stuff right there. So loveunedited.com. Thank you. And he froze again.
Okay. I lost you at the part where scroll to the bottom. If you can continue from there.
Oh, yeah. So if you go to loveunedited.com, you'll find information about all my books. And if you scroll to the bottom, there's a link icon. If you click on that link, that has all my social media references, TikTok, Instagram, my newsletter, all that stuff. So you can sign up for whatever interests you. There's stuff about the miscarriage, my YouTube channels. I have multiple YouTube channels. So all that stuff is right at that link on the bottom.
Okay, nice. Thank you so much, Sam. I know we need to have a quick post-conversation chat. So it's been a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This has been great. I appreciate it so much.
The world needs you, Sam. So keep doing what you're doing.
Same. Let's just keep encouraging each other. This is great. Thank you so much.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Bye.